So thank you for taking the time to talk to us about your experience as a soldier in the U.S. Army in World War II. As we are about to launch the museum in Israel commemorating the Jewish soldiers in World War II, named after Herzog, my late father, I want to ask you about your experience in the U.S. military in the war. And my first question, what role did your Jewish identity play in your decision to enlist in the U.S. military in the war?
I did not enlist. I was drafted at the age of 19. But, of course, anyone who lived in Nazi Germany and experienced the atmosphere and the pressures, and then knew about the beginning of the Holocaust, it was on duty to do this. It needed, it added to the patriotic necessity an obligation to participate.
When and how did you encounter the Holocaust?
Well, when we lived in Germany, we left in September 1938. And the first stage of the Holocaust was discrimination.
Yes.
So you could not associate with Germans. And you couldn't have German employees. And there were signs at all public places. Jews are not desired here, and also at the entrance of the villages where my parents grew up.
Right.
But then, within 2 months of our family leaving, all Jewish men were arrested and put into concentration camps. After the Kristallnacht, then they were driven out of the smaller places and put into cities. And then it became progressively worse. And then my father's sisters, a large number of cousins, my grandmother, they were all put into concentration camps. And so this occurred progressively.
Yeah.
Between 38, when did I become conscious of the Holocaust aspect?
But when you went back to Germany as a soldier, did you know about the physical Holocaust?
So by then, I knew a lot. I knew that all my family had disappeared, and there was no contact with them. And the brother of my grandfather fled to Sweden, where he had a son. So we didn't know about the actual killing.
Yeah.
But we knew they had all disappeared and that they were in Poland. As it happened, my grandmother lived through the concentration camp and then was marched back to Germany from Auschwitz, and she died.
But you came across a labor camp or concentration camp?
Yes, I saw. Yeah. My division liberated a subcamp of Bergen-Belsen. And that was even worse, I'm told, than Bergen-Belsen, because there was relatively few. There were about 1,000 or 2,000 prisoners as a working to work, a slave labor. And they were in an absolutely appalling condition. They had trapped an SS man and tried to kill him, but they were too weak to do any real damage to him. And I wrote an article, I wrote something that Neil Ferguson has in his book. I hadn't intended to publish it. It was something that I wrote under the impact of the moment. And there were gradations in that concentration camp with the Jews at the bottom and then gradations of nationalities. When we went to the next camp, or the next part of the camp, and I don't, because this is recorded, I won't mention the nationality. They spat at us for having dealt with the Jews, so who had to be taken care of first. And in fact, their condition was so bad that when we gave them army food rations, the food was too solid. And
they couldn't eat it.
And they either couldn't eat it, but when they could eat it, it made them very sick because they no longer had the. And when this film was made, there was a film whose name I've now forgotten. But I told the director afterwards that the prisoners in his film looked much too well fed, and it looked much too normal. And one couldn't imagine that the human condition could be reduced to that level and survive. And the man, I wrote about the man that had, there was one man in particular to whom I spoke and whom I mentioned in that little essay I wrote. And Neil Ferguson tracked him down. He eventually wound up in America and died within the last decade and had a fairly normal life. He was maybe 17 at that time. It's indescribable.
Well, my father, Herzog, was one of the liberators of Bergen-Belsen, and he had similar stories to the story you tell.
You couldn't imagine it, to what level human beings can be degraded.
Yeah.
And,
one final question I want to ask you in retrospect. How did your service in the U.S. military in the war impact your worldview and your
for
career?
me, the service, but it's just, for me, the military service really was the integration into America. Because when we came here, as I said, I was 15, but we had no money. We couldn't bring any money, so I had to work at 16. And so I really, with mostly Italian immigrants, you don't have to write all of this down. I was not dealing with America the way I got to know it later.
Yeah.
So in the army, I was with a division that came from northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin. And they were the classical Americans. And they were so broad-minded that I thought I had lost my accent. They never told me, I mean, they never asked me where I was from or anything. I had to come when I afterwards went to Harvard. The questions about my accent
came back
frequent.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
is there a particular moment in your service that you remember during the war in Germany? Something that was a defining moment for you?
in combat situations, when you're with it, I was with the combative division until after the Battle of the Bulge.
Right.
I was during the Battle of the Bulge in a city that was surrounded, not in Baston, it was a city called Mars. And we got shelled every evening. But as you probably experience yourself, you don't have a feeling of personal danger necessarily.
Right. It's true.
You have a general feeling of, so those were, but then I was put into counterintelligence. When our division took Hanover, we were the northernmost American division, south of the Bridge. When our division took Hanover, there were so many deportees and everything had broken down. I was 20 years old and I was in charge of security of Hanover. So I put up a sign that people with police experience should report to a certain place. And the one man came in and I said, "What is your experience?" He said, "Staatspolizei." So as a semi-cynic remark, I said, "Geheime Staatspolizei." He said, "Jawohl, Geheime Staatspolizei." Yeah. So I arrested him. He was outraged. He was eager to help us. And he wanted to show us how trustworthy he was. I said, "Find me your colleagues," which he did. I mean, he told me they were scattered all over. They were all supposed to join the werewolf groups, which never really existed.
What did you get your medal for?
Well, I guess mostly for my counterintelligence work, because I thought I understood the German mind. So I was reasonably effective, or at any rate I made at one stage I found more people left behind as agents. I guess that's and for service in the previous period.
Dr. Kissinger, thank you very much. That was fascinating.